Some of the evils don't lurk in the shadows. They stride right out in the open, smiling, shaking hands, Sunday best. Jack Turner had encountered such men before, but never with evidence. Not until that sweltering July morning in 1887. Started off mean. The sun was already mad before breakfast, heat waves curling up from the ground like the ground itself wanted to scorch everything clean. Jack rode the fence line on the back of his ranch, sweat blending with the dust on his neck, when he rode past the charred carcass of an old church, rock skeletons left over from a fire years ago. That's when he noticed it. At first glance, it appeared to be a pile of rags that had been thrown under a cottonwood by the well. But the stillness, it was off. His gut was telling him to stop. Jack reined his horse to a stop, dismounted, and every step toward it felt slower than the last. It wasn't rags. It was a young woman, about 24, huddled against the trunk, barely supported by the tree itself. Her skin was ghost pale in the sun, but the bruises shrieked angry and red. Her lips were cracked from thirst, breathing shallow and nearly silent. She held onto a dirty wool blanket as releasing it would be to die there on the spot. Jack had witnessed hurt before. Ranch accidents, saloon brawls, even a couple of outlaw battles, but this was something different. The markings were not from bad fortune. They were intentional, too numerous to count. As he knelt beside her, his voice soft and measured, a flash of sunlight caught his attention. Something hidden in the creases of her blanket. A battered little leather notebook. And beside it, a brass lawman's badge. The view punched him in the gut. That was no drifter's badge that lay there. That was a badge owned by someone big. Someone unreachable. Someone Jack had just shook hands with. Right there in the sun, Jack knew whatever was concealed in that blanket would incinerate the whole town. And the girl standing before him was running out of time. He scooped her up, blanket and all, and carried her to the ranch house. She didn't weigh a sack of feed, but she filled his arms with a pain for a whole other reason. Inside, he placed her on the creaky leather couch, poured water to her parched lips, and waited, because people only speak when they feel safe. By evening, the cicadas shrieked outside and the room was hot with an almost palpable thickness. At last, she opened her eyes, hard brown eyes amidst all the terror. She said she was named Laura. And then, in a soft whisper, she said something that chilled his stomach to ice. He wasn't the first to discover her. There had been others. Girls younger than her, some not yet grown. All harmed, all mute. And the men who harmed her, they didn't conceal themselves. They operated the saloon. They sported badges. They posted on the church steps every Sunday morning like the owners. Jack recognized some of those names. He'd bought and sold cattle to them, played cards with them, shook hands with them in daylight. And now he knew the truth. His town was rotten to the core. That evening Jack did not sleep. The air was thick, sticking to his skin, keeping him awake. He sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, gazing out into the darkness. Trouble doesn't knock first. And this time trouble was riding straight to him. At just before dawn it arrived. A single rider on the ridge. Black Hat. Coming slow. Not a neighbor. Not a friend. The man didn't wave, didn't hail. Just rode straight to the house as if he already knew precisely what he'd find there. Jack walked off the porch to greet him halfway. "Morning," he added, his voice toneless. The stranger said nothing. He simply swung down, his hand lying comfortable against the butt of his gun, like it was where it belonged. The man in the black hat finally spoke. "I'm here for the girl." Jack's jaw tightened. "She's under my roof," he said, voice low but firm. "That makes her my concern." The man grinned. A cold, joyless thing. And his hand twitched just enough for Jack to know exactly what came next. The world went silent for half a heartbeat. Then 2 pistol cracks tore the morning apart. When the fog cleared, the stranger lay on the ground, his gun inches from his fingertips. Jack's rifle was warm to the touch. Silently, he pulled the body by the gate. No need to have it lying where Laura would witness. Having heard no word, her eyes were wide and aware. She didn't have to ask. Jack filled himself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table and said, "They know where you are now. We've got work to do. And if you've been following along with this story, you already sense it. The trail ahead's going to get tougher." By noon, July sun had dried the yard hot enough you could fry an egg on the fence rail. Jack didn't mind. He was too busy unfolding what Laura had stashed beneath that blanket. A leather journal filled with names, dates, and locations. A ribbon ripped from the mayor's Sunday suit. A dried blood-streaked sheriff's badge. Each item was like holding a live rattlesnake, hazardous but too valuable to discard. Lara's voice was rock-steady as she outlined every item, the kind of steadiness that can only be attained from having lived through too much. By the time it was all over, Jack knew one thing for sure. Holding on to this in Redemption Creek was a death sentence. If the wrong people acquired it first, the town won't be the only. If the tale managed to get there, there'd be no covering it up. But getting it out was the secret, the stagecoach monitored, the telegraph operated by the sheriff's own relative. So Jack opted for the old rancher's method, by horseback. 2 days west to a freight driver he could trust. Then the truth would travel by rails rather than hooves. Late in the afternoon, he saddled his bay, stashed the journal and proof in an oilskin bag, and tied it secure. Laura stood on the porch, a look of terror in her eyes. Not for herself this time, but for him. He gave her the Winchester. "If I don't show up in 3 days, you head north to Fort Bridger. Don't ever stop." He did not give her a chance to respond. He just faced the burning horizon. Somewhere out in the heat shimmer, men were already after him. 2 days later, the Cheyenne courthouse was crowded so close you could smell the sweat and the dust. Jack waited in the rear, hat pulled low, while Laura sat close to the witness stand. She didn't have to testify. The journal, the ribbon, the badge, they spoke for themselves better than words. Ahead of time, the men who'd ruled Redemption Creek in terror sat in chains. The mayor white as chalk, the sheriff's hands trembling, even the pastor looking down. The federal marshal read out the indictments slow and plain, each word hammering a nail into coffins. When the gavel came down, its ring traveled like the pealing of a church bell. Laura let out a breath she'd been holding for months. Outside, in a big blue summer sky, she regarded Jack. "What now?" Jack smiled, a little, the kind of smile a man wears when the hardest part is done. "We go home." Home at the ranch. Life fell into something neither of them anticipated. Morning coffee on the porch. Rebuilding fences side by side. The silence wasn't hollow, it was filled. Somehow between the work and the sunsets, love grew. Slow, steady, like prairie grass after a storm. In retrospect, Jack would tell you the battle was never about toppling a few rotten apples. It was about demonstrating that sometimes silence is not an option, that standing firm, even when the cards are loaded and peril is certain, can alter the course of everything. And perhaps that's the question to us all. When your time arrives, will you turn away, or will you stand? If this tale resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and ride on. Because out here in the Wild West, there's always another trail, another tale, and perhaps a second chance at doing what is right.